introduce themselves and disclose their preferred gender pronouns.
I'm Saranya, my preferred gender pronoun is she.
Avianna, my preferred gender pronoun is fiance, otherwise no preference.
My name is Sae, no preference.
Lui
Mikkel.
Alright, judging along with us are Lui Manguiat. So on the motion about forfeiting emotions once you join the army, I welcome the Prime Minister to open the case. Let's stand.
Here. When you are in the battlefield, your biggest enemy is not the person standing on the other side of the line. It is you, it is your emotions, it is the fear instilled in you that makes you act on things that are not rationally decided upon, that causes you psychological trauma, but moreover, it also makes the military ineffective and further damages the lives of people who you're supposed to be fighting for at the end of the day, right? We first have to establish that side opposition may come up and try to talk about how the people who don't have emotions may start just shooting everyone because they can't feel sympathy, they can't feel empathy. But we also have to realize that ethics of war, ethics for how you should act and how you should value lives of other people is not determined by emotions, but rather something that is agreed upon morally by everyone. It's a consensus that has been established here without the use of emotions to begin with, right? So we don't think that's going to be the issue of today's debate. But moreover, we have to understand that people often act because of their fear, because of their inability to rationalize things in situations where they're high pressure, right? And we think that in those situations, the ethics that we have already established is the best way for these people to act, to not only serve the purpose of the military, but moreover, to serve their own purpose of being a soldier in the military at the end of the day. Because essentially what we're doing is, we're forcing emotionless jobs on emotional people, right? What we're doing at the end of the day is we're using the military, which is supposed to carry out jobs that don't require emotions, that are supposed to carry out inhumane jobs, and forcing human beings with emotions to carry these jobs out, right? So what we're preventing at the end of the day is for individuals to act out of the best rational decision-making capacity that they can. Because oftentimes they'll act out of fear, of selfishness, of greed, right? While it may be admirable for an individual to not sacrifice his life because he loves his family and wants to go back to it, we think that that's something that's not in line with what the intent of the military was to begin with, and it's not the type of military we want in today's debate. So that brings me to my policy, right? Firstly, assuming the technology that exists, right, that can take away your emotions, will be considered to be put into a deposit bank, which means that once these soldiers are relieved of service, they can go back to having these emotions, right? But to clarify, we're not talking about when they're off duty, but only when they're relieved of service at the end of their service, right? But moreover, the important thing to consider also is that these soldiers and their families have to consent to using this technology when they're recruited into the military in the first place. And lastly, on how we achieve transparency by enforcing the Geneva policies and how we can ensure that that the acts done under the military will be humane.
Will you remove the emotions of generals and people of higher authority?
Yes, we will do that as well. We will also remove the emotions of people of generals and higher authority, and I'll be further elaborating upon that in my argument today, right? So that brings me to my argument. That why was the military created in the first place, right? It was created with the intention of having no emotion to begin with. That's why you have such discipline in the military. That's why it's super strict, right? That's why the timing in which you eat every single day, the amount of food you can eat is restricted every single day, because we need to be able to ensure that these individuals act on discipline and do not act on their own personal selfishness and are able to follow rules and follow regulations that are instilled upon by the military itself, which is also instilled upon on the higher level by executive powers, right? So the intention of the military was to carry out decisions made by the executive powers to maybe for security of the state itself, or it may be to aid other states in whatever issues they may be having, right? So what we allow is, by removing of emotions, this military that was created with the intention of carrying out these orders is the most clean and effective on our side of the house. Why is that so, right? Let's look at it this way. So individual soldiers who are on the ground, right, when they feel threatened, they often shoot out of fear, right? That they feel threatened by an individual who may just be innocent, who just may be a shadowy figure running across, and they feel threatened and often shoot that, right? That's like 80% of civilian deaths in Middle Eastern conflicts are because of accidental shootings, and because these individuals feel threatened the soldiers feel threatened for their life, right? So on the comparative, what happens then on our side is this. When we remove these emotions, right, these individuals are gonna no longer act out of fear, but they're gonna have to assess the threat based on the data provided to them, right? Is the gun pointing at me? Is the individual running toward me? These type of illustrations that exist in their mind now is no longer governed by the fear that is instilled upon them, but what they can observe in reality, right? So furthermore, we also think that, for example, in cases where you want to capture an individual to interrogate, which would be the ideal case scenario for militaries to get information out of the other side. Now, because you want to capture the individual for interrogation, oftentimes because of the fear you have, you end up shooting individuals who you could have captured, right? That's why we believe that because of fear, oftentimes military actions become ineffective and are unable to carry out the purpose that they were intended to do so in the very first place, right? Now, we also concede that they'll probably talk about how these individuals will end up bombing villages because they're unable to do these things, right? We agree that that will happen, right? But what we get on our side is that we cannot hold these individuals accountable anymore because they're not acting on their own volition, of their own fear, of carrying out, like, to protect themselves, but they're going to be carrying out orders that are in line with what the state has directed them to do, right? So they're going to be following a certain line of ethics and a certain line of logic, which is in line with the state, and the state can be held accountable for that, which is the most effective way to run the military, and this will be extended upon by my second speaker. But moreover, on the idea of how military protocol is better followed, is going to allow for individuals to mess up less, right? Which means that because they're now following a certain set of guidelines, they're less likely to mess up in situations, for example, of having to go and capture captives for interrogation, right? Now, because they're lesser mess ups by these individuals, this brings me to my second argument about the individuals themselves and the trauma they have to go through when they're in these situations, right? So the PTSD that's caused to soldiers on the ground, 80% of them is caused by mistakes and by the guilt that they feel when they accidentally kill an innocent individual, right? For example, it's not about seeing the death happening, but being the cause of the death, or bearing the guilt of the death that you partook in when you were in those scenarios. So because of the loss of innocent lives that were caused by you, oftentimes these individuals have PTSD, and when they come back, are unable to deal with the trauma that they have, right? And it becomes a lot harder for the state to help them fix these type of issues, because these are very traumatic incidents that they're unable to deal with on their own, right? So this also oftentimes stops people from joining the military, which will also make it which makes it harder for them to recruit. But moreover, it cripples these individuals to a point where they are unfixable, where it can lead to cases of dementia and other nervous system issues. And we think that PTSD is a very big part of today's debate, and it will also be further elaborated upon by my second speaker. And that's why, because we value the lives of the soldiers themselves, and because of effective military actions, we believe that you should go with side proposition.
Thank you. I now invite the leader of opposition to open the gates.
Ladies and gentlemen, the decision to join the army and to perform in the army is an emotional one. You sacrifice your own personal life. You live away your family. You go do away your own personal lives in the love of the state, in the experience that you love, the state that you want to serve it, or even for the experience that you want to protect your family. If you remove that, ladies and gentlemen, you remove an integral driving force that leads to the success of the military. which is deemed in motivations, and number 2, in camaraderie. Which is why we would never allow individuals to remove their emotions, in which we posit that emotions actually drive and allow the military to succeed. Let's characterize then how this will play out in both sides. What would it look like with a pure rationale? And what exactly is the best decision making? We didn't really clarify that. Here, clarification coming from them. They said number 1, that would be the minimization on the harm of the self of the individual, meaning that they will make decisions based on their survivability of that certain aspects. But the conflicting frame, number 2, is that it will depend on the success of a certain mission. So for example, they would want to choose decisions that were more likely to succeed and therefore have a greater society or greater aspect on impact on the military and on the state. What exactly are emotions therefore, Mr. Speaker? We say emotions are an identification with humanity. It's not just about pain, it's not just about fear, but it's also establishing connections and bonds with one another. It's actually through those bonds that we create a more cohesive military. It's number 1 on the effectivity of the military, and number 2, how you actually make wars less human. I want to respond with a couple of things. I want to first respond to their model, because if their problem is that they want to reduce PTSD, they have a solution in which they're going to deposit emotions and give that back those emotions after the process in the military. What's the problem with this? How does PTSD occur? PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. That means it's processed after war. What that happens is you process any traumatic experiences you have incurred during that military, and you only feel the brunt of it after you return. So what that means is, if they're willing to deposit these emotions after the individual has returned, they don't solve their problems on PTSD, ladies and gentlemen. They have to fix that problem, they have to shift their stance. But the second thing I want to respond to, no thank you, is this idea that the military is an inhumane job, ladies and gentlemen. It's devoid of emotions. But in the same light, they say they will be driven by ethics, they will be driven by morality. I want to respond firstly that it's not agreed about, ethics are not agreed about by morals. The Geneva Convention was not agreed about by these big standard of morals. In fact, our morals are shaped by our shared connection with humanity. They are shaped by how we identify with an individual at the end of the day. So it's either you have individuals who are motivated to kill every individual because they don't have a sense of ethics, or if they still have ethics, we prefer that on our side, where you have established emotions to accrue these benefits at the end of the day. No, it is not a humane job, Mr. Speaker. If it is a humane job, you would do anything at any stake to, for example, take down ISIS at the expense of a Syrian orphanage at the end of the day. Which is why we discredit this idea that military individuals are trained to lose their emotions. You strengthen your emotions through training, ladies and gentlemen. You create a greater sense of iron, steel skin, in order for you to ensure your jobs are carried out dutifully. We don't want this cop-out mechanism where you're just going to remove all emotions at the day and therefore remove that inhumane job. I want to first move on to the idea of how emotions allow for a better military performance. And I'm going to be premised on this argument as to how most motivations are usually either to the dedication of the state, or even if they don't necessarily like being in the military, they do it out of sacrifice for their loved ones. How does this translate in operation? Number 1, we see that in a lot of their trainings and boot camps instill a culture of camaraderie and even nationalism to that extent. For example, they live together in isolation, away from the internet, away from communication. Therefore, they have to know one another because they're going to perform their missions with one another. Number 2, they're living away from their families, ladies and gentlemen. They're trained to, for example, run around or build a strength of resistance at the end of the day. If they're going to focus solely on the physical aspect of these individuals, that's not going to drive motivation at the end of the day. Moreover, we're not talking about mind control, where we're going to dictate every individual is to follow that individual at the end of the day, but it's looking towards how exactly we shape that, for example, emotional connection. So how does that then translate to a better decision as what I, for example, talked about? Number 1, it allows for individuals for the willingness to follow a general, ladies and gentlemen, to follow their accords, or follow their own instances at the end of the day. Number 2, it actually makes these individuals invest in extra effort at the end of the day. So what this means is they're more willing to take greater risks out of the love, or out of, for example, the established camaraderie they have with their brothers, or even for the love of their family. And that's how it leads to better decisions, because you're going to risk your life when it is necessary, but also you have the resistance to torture, maybe, for example. But even more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, you know when to retreat. If not, you're treating these people as human sacrifices. And lastly, we say, in terms of decisions on the other side of the house, this is why I raised the POI, because they're conflicting frames at the end of the day. As a soldier, you want to self-preserve your own ability at the day. You want to ensure your own safety. And you don't even need emotions for that. But on the contrary, generals and people of higher authority, because they have no emotions, will not care for these individuals. Therefore, they will just sacrifice all these individuals in numbers and ensure a more efficient mission is taken in the process. But at the expense that we lose individuals and we make people more as robots than people who can make rational decisions in the military. Yes, sir.
Why are professions like doctors, lawyers, and psychologists not allowed to treat their loved ones instead of school?
That's illegitimate in the debate because it's not tied, and I'm not sure how they're going to flag it to the military, especially when I'm not sure how exactly that ties the emotional connection of them treating is not allowed to you fixing the military. Secondly, about how it creates less humane wars. It exaggerates the conditions of war. In fact, we argue it's going to propagate the more use of war crimes at the end of the day. Because war crimes are built on ethics, they're built on values. We posit that the reason why war crimes occur is because there's a lack of emotions placed into justifying a decision. So for example, if you know that ISIS is, for example, camping out in a Syrian orphanage, the rational decision is to, for example, take it out as soon as possible without caring for the Syrian orphans at the end of the day. And we say that's harmful because that will lead to for example, to a less humane war. And more importantly, for example, you actually create more collateral damage at the end of the day. And that's where you get more and less humane wars, Mr. Speaker, because they're willing to sacrifice this collateral damage at the very expense as long as you can succeed in your mission. And we say that's harmful in the military, especially when the military is also a humane job. It's ensuring the protection of humanity in society. What happens on their side is that wars are made worse. At least on our side, we can mitigate these war crimes from happening because we shape the ethics and we shape what determines a war crime. We're very proud of the process.
I recommend the Deputy Prime Minister to further the case.
Let me start by agreeing with opposition. Leader of Op said that the horrors of war educated man on morality. I fully agree to this. The atrocities that we've seen during the first two world wars led Woodrow Wilson to create the 14-point speech, which led to the League of Nations, which led to the Geneva Convention. We agree that our morality was based on our history as an inhumane and vicious human society. But I think that we've experienced enough inhumanity in the world today that our moral frameworks have already been established, that protocols for international and wartime security have already been done. It's about damn time that we practice it. And we think that because of emotions, we are unable to practice the things we agreed on as one common humanity. And I will explain why we lead to a more peaceful engagement in war and why we transform the humanity of war under our policy. But first, let me work on rebuttals. The first thing that he says, right, about this whole moral framework thing, let me just wrap up the thing I already argued in the introduction. The thing is, in post-conflict, we weren't learned enough. We already know it's bad to kill children. We already know that majority of lives have to be saved at all costs. And we think that these protocols are already trying to be integrated within military protocol, which is why it's unfair to kill civilians. The problem is, majority of these soldiers get away with it. Why? Because militaries now operate under things such as their own form of government, court-martials, for example, wherein these generals can simply be laid off. That exact same thing happened twice in Afghanistan, where 2 civilian populations were bombed. The American government wasn't given the full brunt of accountability because they said it was due to the moral breakdown of one of their generals in terms of mental capacity, in terms of having PTSD. Right? So what did we establish? We think that one, protocols for humanity already made. It's not just done out of fear. It's out of fear of trying to save yourself. Second, on PTSD, he misconstrued Saranya's argument when he said that PTSD is called post-traumatic disorder, which is why it only happens afterwards. The reason why there are so many military boo-boos in status quo is because PTSD is like chicken pox. There's an incubation period. Therapists can identify when it's in full blood, but not when the symptoms are arriving. And you cannot tell when these symptoms will come. You don't know when your first anxiety attack will will happen when you're trying to do a surgical strike. You don't know if your ability to be yourself is still intact because no one knows when mental disorders strike. They breathe inside your brain and come as monsters when you least expect it. And we think on our side, even if they still experience it afterwards, which by the way is less because they make less mistakes and there will be less guilt, we think that all the front lines where it matters the most, they are not plagued by mental diseases and are fault as humanity for having brains. Third thing, survivability. And this is where our team makes a trade-off. We think it's okay that some soldiers die. Soldiers know that they will die if they have to. And we think that is okay. But when he said, oh, survivability of families, government still believes in it, he didn't listen to Saranya. She used an illustration saying, your love for your family may not be there. It might be in your mental locker. And that is okay. Because instead, you will fulfill your ability to sacrifice yourself to save your comrades, to save more soldiers, or to make sure that the mission is successful. This is also a response to them saying, oh, bros and camaraderie. Them drinking and having a good time during off hours is camaraderie. And I agree that maybe those bros will have your back at the front lines, but we assure that on our side because you are not afraid of dying. Therefore, you will make sure that you will follow protocol, meaning that you might sacrifice yourself to save your troops. I have more bro confidence knowing that my fellow men are not afraid and they might die for me and I might live, and that's an okay trade-off as opposed to, hey, we're friends, maybe he won't leave me hanging. We think we still have that on our side. Before I continue, please. Sure. Okay, great. I would argue accountability and something that leads to inhumane wartime and status quo. The problem is the state is not accountable. It's odd. The numerous instances of civilian threats from America, namely in Afghanistan, where more than 3,000 people died unnecessarily, almost half of them minors, and the only thing they got at the end of the day was our generals experienced an emotional breakdown. Our troops were afraid and they had PTSD. Numerous military reports revealed, for example, by things like prison as well as WikiLeaks, describe military lack of accountability by flagging things off as emotional distress. They even have special codes for emotional distress now because it's the military's famous excuse. It makes sure that people on the higher end of the scale, meaning your head of state, your head of security, will not be held accountable for flagging those bomb threats to begin with. What does it mean? We want to remove these parts of the military in which they have an easy way out and an excuse for not being accountable to the global community. It's about damn time America puts its money where its mouth is and protects human rights for them being the world's quote-unquote global police. What does it mean? It means that when you do a very expensive operation, such as, for example, carpet bombing, and you say that it was an executive order done by the state, not done by a general out of fear no longer, because there is no fear to be experienced at all, we think this is where we hold the state most accountable. It is also better, for example, to have better military testimonies where you are not afraid of threats from your other generals, for example, or you're not afraid, for example, of leading towards greater damage to your own personal affects as compared to the military. We think that individuals who choose to sacrifice their emotions are logically equipped to defend the state and understand the macro version that is, for example, instilled in the military before 6. Go ahead.
Wait, so how do you establish camaraderie among your peers if all of them are devoid of emotion?
There is no camaraderie. But at least you know, these people are not afraid to die for you because it is protocol to make sure that more troops stay alive so we continue fighting. It's practical for the government to keep their soldiers alive. Every bullet shot is wasted. Every person dead is more than $45,000 in training per month. We think that it's only logical to keep these people alive at the end of the day. By the way, it's also logical to have morality, similar to how Kant established the categorical imperative. Morality can be logical. If you, for example, imagine a world that everyone does that action, would you want to live in that world? We think it's devoid of emotion. Majority of moral philosophers even insert that if you want to do what's good for common man, it's good to sacrifice yourself. So yes, we think survivability and the fear of death should be absent in the military. Moving on, we think that states have to be accountable because they are only credible as for long as they abide by their own rules. What does this mean? There are certain things called flashpoints of action in which the state operates, meaning that America can only, for example, protect child labor and child rights as long as they protect children. They can't be, for example, people that go back on their own word, which is why, for example, it's harder for them to push some agendas as pushing boots on the ground because they don't treat their militaries well. What happens with our policy? What happens is that these states are fully accountable now because there is no longer an excuse for the military to call it human error. What happens is that the state will be forced to comply with global agendas because it will be very apparent that they're not. What happens is that if the United States follows because it wants confidence of its allies, you want more people on board on fighting for a greater humanity, and this is where we state the Geneva Convention can fully come into fruition. We think that human error is a conceivable wrong. The same exact reason why we don't allow doctors to treat their family members, we don't allow psychiatrists to treat their families, because emotions can prevent you from doing the job. We think we do the job well. We are very proud of those things.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to answer two main questions in my speech in diametric opposition to the previous speaker. Firstly, how do we best fight wars effectively? And secondly, how do we protect the dignity of humanity in the wars that we fight? Because both sides recognize it's a good thing. But before that, let me talk about this really weird alternative they gave. They said we wanted people to pick like Kant, right? Like you have the rational morality. There's a reason why the categorical imperative is such a shitty mode of reasoning, right? Because you need to recognize that oftentimes a lot of things that are emotional in nature are things that we have to act upon, right? Like torture as a method, like in terms of outcome, is quite a beneficial thing. But if you look at the common humanity of the other individual, the emotion, that the fact that you don't want to be another person experiencing that as well, that you wouldn't want to subject individuals to this because you don't want your opponents to be subjecting your brothers in arms to this as well, is something that needs to be taken into account. This seems completely shelved and neglected by the other side of the house. First, how do we fight wars effectively? Now, let me first address this idea of PTSD through two broad responses. One, if you look at it, it's factually the case that PTSD rates are declining. Why? Because mental health conditions are getting better, because things like therapy are getting better, and a lot of research is increasingly coming out. In 2017, I did this because this is my research paper for my quality. 4 researches have been conducted in terms of 1, the mental health conditions of individuals in war, and 2, their reintegration processes, where even their families are also subjected to the same reintegration process to make that easier, right? So why is this not enough? But second, your side tortures the soldiers worse because all the guilt is shelved and compounded, and then it's all given to that individual at the point in which he gets all of these emotions back. Because all of those memories of all the abuses he committed, all the abuses he was subjected to, are still there. The only difference is the reaction happens afterwards. They're so much less, they're less able to, one, adjust and account for a lot of the harm that can be done as it is happening. We would posit that if they are dealing with distress, as it is happening in moderation, it is easier for them to deal with. You are torturing soldiers on your side of the house. Now, second idea I want to address, no thank you. They said the fear of death is removed. One, no, that's not true. The unwillingness to die is not only rooted in the emotional fear or pain, but in the irrationality as well, right? If you join the army, it's often because your education is free after, it's often because you're set for life, right? The fact that all of that calculus works rests on the fact that your life being there is a crucial part of that rational calculus being worth it. What does this mean? Secondly, how do you overcome these limitations then, given that they exist? The attachment that you have to the military unit, to the officer, to your state, isn't rooted in rationality, it's frequently emotional. That's why, even if I will lose my life, rationally that means all the benefits I wanted will not come to me, I will still sacrifice myself. Because I buy into the notion of the sovereignty of the state. Because I buy into the interests of the military. I buy into the social construct like that espouses as a result of the continued camaraderie we share, right? In the absence of a lot of this, all you have is, rationally speaking, if I as an individual am not likely to get out alive if I go to this operation, I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to abandon the operation in the middle. Third response, no thank you. Merely just that. In the absence of emotion, it's not likely to be ethics and norms and laws that are going to govern you. What it's likely to be is your self-preservation. Because in the end of the day, that's what's going to matter to individuals the most, right? Because all of the possible benefits that you would have wanted in the military do not accrue. Their side makes it less likely for people to fully commit. Why? Because why will I not abandon my post if I'm going to lose my life and not get any of the benefits that I wanted to get upon joining the military? It's just not likely those are true. Before I move on to my second question. Yes.
Here's the thing, if you think torture is something you need emotions for so you can pull out of torture in your world, that won't happen. You still have to follow command. Their best case, Mr. Chair, is status quo where these abuses still happen. Unless you can prove a bottom-up approach change in the military, you're
Look. You're more likely, because we have to recognize in the way the world works like now, you're not likely to have a lot of prosecutions of generals, of soldiers in the US. They didn't sign into the ICC, the UN is prone to paralysis. What does this mean? As a rational person, I know these realities. That's why I'm not likely to care about international convention. Because the US is likely to veto any operation or to veto any movement or report done against this. The ICC is not signed by the US. I'm not likely to be held accountable. In the absence of all these, I know this to be rationally true. This leads on to my second argument. How do we necessarily fight wars with dignity? What they told us in their first speech was that war ethics are pre-agreed upon and it's grounded in ration. No, factually untrue. The notion that torture is immoral is grounded in emotion. It rests on you being able to put yourself in the shoes of the torture victim. Genocide can be rationally justified because it disallows the enemy from ever recovering from that assault. But it is shelved and disallowed because of the notion of the common humanity, which is rooted in the ability to appeal to the other individuals in the other side. That's inherently an emotional experience. Wars are already incredibly violent and dehumanizing. But why do we not practice war crime conventions? One, obviously it's not the case that emotions make it much less likely that you will respect these. We don't think that really takes into account, but it's because of the rational calculus that the UN is prone to paralysis, that the ICC is toothless, that international norms can't be followed with deep. Right? That makes it less likely for these soldiers to follow these cases. If that is the only calculus you're going to give, what is the alternative when you look at emotions? One, appealing to the pain of the torture victim as you see that person suffering. Two, appealing to the fact that if you're subjecting this person to torture, the other side is likely to counteract the torture of your fellow soldiers as well. A lot of these emotional calculuses are the only things stopping individuals from committing atrocious acts. The death of them in this debate was conceding that the goal of war was to limit the damage or limit the dehumanization rather than just the consequences. But we took them on both fronts. We told them both that we fight wars more effectively on our side of the house, and we told them that we fight wars more humanely, right? And this idea that they're more likely to do testimonies if they don't have emotion is not true. One, because obviously it is the case that a lot of these testimonies happen after your service in war. So if emotions was the problem, your emotions are going to be back, and it's going to be the same thing, right? So we don't think that's going to hurt.
I now welcome government with
Here.
For example, the world will not support you if you want to be the country for years of child soldiers and years and freedom. Which means that the consistent policy to gain ground practically.
Perfect.
Yeah, so
The reason why military decisions are always made from the furthest distance from the conflict is because these individuals are usually the ones, like the generals they claim, to be the most rational. The reason for that is because they're least compelled by fear to actually make decisions. They're least compelled by things like rage, like from your brother's dying, for example, to make stupid decisions in war. At the end of the day, the problem with Op's case is that it premises the entire case to be upon the soldiers on the ground themselves who don't actually make the decisions, right? Understand that military strategies are created by politicians or policymakers to maximize success rate, to minimize casualties, to have the fastest resolution ever, right? These are things that are hindered on their side because soldiers will not be following orders to achieve those things, but rather be compelled by their so-called humanity to save their brothers out of anger and out of rage, right? We don't think ultimately that it's a world that is actually more humane. In fact, we think that as a world that will prolong conflict even further because American politicians increasingly blame their own generals for being too emotional and thereby them not claiming any culpability to their errors and fucked up in war at the end of the day. I'm going to talk about two main clashes. One, on which side is a more humane world in today's debate, and secondly, on what does soldiers forfeiting their emotions mean for the efficacy of the conflict, right? On this clash, I have two levels. One, on accountability to the states declaring war to begin with, and secondly, on the issue of trauma itself, which they have been very dismissive about, right? Recognize that my second speaker is also a psychologist as well. She knows PASD, you cannot say bullshit there. Now, on the first pledge, Mr. Chair, most unethical actions are compelled predominantly out of emotions. They're done out of fear, panic, and stress. They're done out of flight or fight, right? They're done out of things that don't require any thinking. That is to say, these are the decisions made without a capacity to rationalize what kind of harms and benefits it's going to bring to the world, right? Ultimately, ethics become out of the questions when you are actually very, very emotional because people lose sight of reasons, right, or any planned instructions that may be a lot more efficient to begin with, right? And therefore, they do actions not done out of contemplation, but rather out of impulse only. Therefore, if their case is contingent on the rational calculus of boots on the ground, we don't think that's going to happen in reality anyway, right? Because the very people most likely to act irrationally and unstably to do things like killing children out of panic, right? Killing civilians out of panic are usually those people that we want to support at the end of the day, right? Therefore, we think that insofar as we recognize that military decisions have been made away from the conflict ground itself, they already lost the debate, right? But more importantly, Mr. Chair, we think that we better hold humanity here because we have more check and balances on our side. How is that? So, on our side, what we provide is that any military action that's being executed by the executive, for example, are directly representative of the people, right? Are directly accountable to protocols like the Geneva Convention, for example, are directly accountable to the UN Human Rights Commission, for example, right? Those kind of things are representative of the morality that the world actually subscribes and believes to, right? This is the kind of morality we never engage with, and obviously that the humanity now knows enough how evil we all can be, right? At the end of the day, what we actually bring here on the comparative is that we hold ourselves directly accountable to the people, right? We prevent the soldiers, a small group of people, acting out of emotions and actually being more humane in a sense to prolong the conflict as compared to our way to check against such kind of fallibility of being human with emotions at all, right? But the second thing they came to pick us on is the idea of how like we're gonna like subject these soldiers to even more abuse and things like that, right? Now, understand, Mr. Chair, soldiers are soldiers because they kill. They made the choice to get into the military in the first place, knowing very well that they have to kill, right? And so far as they're going to actually cripple the soldiers with feelings of guilt, feelings of fear, right? These things are like incubation that Avi was talking about, and they completely ignore, right? And fundamentally, when you remove the emotions, you don't allow the incubation to happen. All you do after you have been for your service is to realize that, oh, okay, I have done my job in the most efficient, fastest way possible, as regulated by international bodies and my people and my government. What happens on our side is that we achieve the world that doesn't allow the soldiers to themselves to feel that they are betraying their brothers or things like that, right? So camaraderie on the side is really pure bullshit. No, thank you. Second clash. Now, when the soldiers forfeiting emotions, what the soldiers forfeiting emotions mean for the efficacy of the conflict? First thing, accountability, right? Understand that when US went into Afghanistan, for example, when you had these stupid foreign policies,
all of those which failed, for example, the General Douglas MacArthur invading North Korea, right? Those things failed because of the emotional impulses of the military generals on the ground themselves, right? These are people driven by the ambitions of success. These are people driven by being power hungry, right? These are people who are more likely to abuse because they're in high positions, right? So therefore, even on their highest grounds, that authorities, for example, generals may be, maybe inclined to be more ethical. We don't think that's really the case, right? We see when people are in war, they're fueled by things like adrenaline and testosterone, right? These are chemicals that forces them to become more aggressive, right, rather than more benevolent, right? So on their side, in the best case scenario, that they do actually act out more humanely, they have to tell us conditions on how that's even possible in the first place, right? Or else that is also not reality, right? But more importantly, because the US now cannot simply shift this to emotional people because they've already forfeited emotions, what happens is that any flashpoints of actions that the US does will be more critically scrutinized by the world, right? Because these are direct consequences of foreign policy, right? These are direct consequences of the US planning the most strategic way to invade somewhere, for example, right? Therefore, should the US make a mistake, it is so much easier for them to be condemned, so much easier for them to be regulated at the end of the day, right? But more important than that, we also think we improve efficacy because allies now know reliably how they can follow up the US foreign policy and strategic military policy at the end of the day. Now, second level, the clash is on trauma, right? Now, the clash here is incubation versus things like camaraderie, right? We think that very emotional support actually exacerbate the PTSD to begin with, right? We think that you feel a lot more pain if the brothers formed by camaraderie are being shot in the war, for example, right? We think you feel a lot more pain throughout the whole process. And these things stay on your mind again and again and again and again until you are relieved of your studies altogether, right? And that's why you suffer things like dementia. That's why you suffer all these kind of things. It's a prolonged period of incubation as opposed to simply realizing things, right? When you realize things, but you can rationalize them, I think a moral understanding out of them, it is very different on our side that people realize that they are doing things out of nationalism and not necessarily out of simply camaraderie and other emotions that may impair their ability to actually do things in conflict. Therefore, we are the side that recognizes that ethics sometimes require us to not feel pain in order to prevent the pain of many more people in the world. Ethics requires us to recognize that efficacy sometimes is the best way to minimize casualties. Go inside proposition.
I think that war should never be reduced to pure logic, pure rationality, cold-hearted steel. We think that war is exactly the epitome of the human emotion, right? It is about the destruction of lives. It is about the removal of somebody's dignity. We think that those kinds of emotions are absolutely essential to the way we view not only civilians on the ground, but the way we view our soldiers when they go back home. The way individuals are likely to act even after these wars have been fought. We think that we remove all of that love, all of that care that has to go into actually making these decisions when you remove emotions. And you make way for making the efficient decisions, which are at their core the most heartless decisions. We'd like to have a world where those decisions don't have to be as destructive as possible, where less collateral damage is made. We think that's only possible in our world. Because I'm going to be talking about two issues in my speech. Firstly, where do we fight better wars actually preserve human dignity? And secondly, we're dealing with the issue of PTSD and how do we help soldiers after the war is fought, right? So let's deal with a few rebuttals that don't quite fit into my issues. Because they told us about this thing about we have the decision makers at a distance from the conflict because we want them to make the best possible decisions. We want them to have logic and reason and not be affected by emotion. But that's not really the reason, right? The reason is you don't want your decision makers to be in the field and be dying and being tortured. That's the practical, logical reason we don't have these people in the field. But obviously, these people also do have some sort of rationale or some sort of emotion going on behind their decision making. So we don't understand this distance point that they brought up to us, right? But they also told us that this maximizes success rate. When you have no human connection, when you don't care about other people, you're not especially attached to anyone. But we think that in wars, what makes people win wars, what wins wars, is going that extra mile. Is pushing when you don't think you can push anymore. Is fighting when there's nothing left to fight for. That kind of motivation only comes when you have a deep-rooted connection to the people you are fighting with. That only happens when you have a deep-rooted connection to the family back home who is waiting for you, to the state that you are serving. Even though it's an amorphous blob and it's an abstract idea, that connection only happens when you can process that, when you can rationalize that and make that idea in your mind. That doesn't happen when I don't form a bond with my brothers in arms during training, when I don't feel that this guy next to me has a family at home as well, when I can't sympathize with him, when I see him as just another robot just like me. That means that I can't imagine those things. I won't feel that when the time comes that I need to put my life on the line or I need to save somebody, I'm going to do it for them. Because on their side, they said, no, you give your life up for your brothers because you're not afraid of death anymore. We told you that likelihood, that the fear of death is still somewhat going to be there because that's not purely emotion, right? That's also an animal instinct. That's something rooted in who we are as people. So we think that in that case, the difference of putting your life on the line for someone else only happens when you care about that someone else, not just when it's an efficient outcome of that mission. So we think that all of their problems as well about ineffectivity, about human error are also minimized, right? Because what does the army really look like? We're not talking about random citizens returning to the field. We're talking about rigorous training. These things are already minimized to a great extent. Like, human error isn't quite as common as we say it is, or more likely than not, these soldiers are very well trained and really are psychologized into being capable of absorbing the harms of war. But even when we remove emotions, we don't remove human error because their deadly assumption is that removing emotions equals we are now infallible, we make no mistakes. But that's not true. In fact, you're more likely to err on the side of more immoral decisions because those are probably going to be the most efficient. I will torture the terrorist because I will get that information in 1 hour rather than 24 hours. I will disbomb that Syrian orphanage where ISIS fighters are hiding because that means that I will destroy one of their strongholds. I don't care about collateral damage anymore. We think that's where we get more destructive wars. That's when we get people that don't care, especially when we're talking about generals who are also not in the field but also don't have emotions. So that's more compounded when it comes to their decision making. So they don't even have that. They don't even have the up close experience of that situation to temper that kind of trigger reaction, right? So all of these problems about accountability as well that we heard coming from the second speaker, which he told us about operations that failed because of emotion, and now it's a cop out. Now people can say that, well, it's because I was emotionally breaking down, therefore courts cannot hold me accountable. Is this really true, right? Let's look at like conflicts like Iraq, for example. People don't say that, oh, it's because of emotion, it's because we cared about it, or it's because of we weren't rational. But these things failed because of rational calculation, that throwing more force, throwing more soldiers means greater amount of success. That's a rational calculation. It's also an extremely cruel one. And we want to avoid decisions like that. We want to avoid thinking of people as collateral damage. That only happens in their world, right? Because these strong, we believe that in order for us to win wars, in order for us to preserve human life, it's absolutely necessary that we keep that respect for human dignity at the heart of what we do. Because it doesn't just help when we're dealing with like civilians or when we're dealing with, let's say, interpreters whose information would save my life because he created a connection to me, because I reached out to him and that saved my trip. That wasn't an efficient choice, right? At first, it's not a rational choice, but it does lead to efficient results. It's not absolutely true that emotion equals failure. So we don't understand this whole case coming from them that is always going to lead to failure or worse decisions. But for what? The only benefit of your policy is to make sure these people keep fighting on because they love their state so much. They had the same vigor when they signed up for the military to begin with. Their whole inspiration thing is not to be exclusive.
No, that's what you're saying, right? Is that like we think that on our side, what happens is that you still have that sustained motivation when you're in the field when you need it most. Even if you had that vigor when you signed up, it doesn't matter if you take it away when I'm in the field and I need that motivation when I'm being shot at and when I can choose to run away. But instead, I will stay because I care about my brothers in arms. That kind of decision making never happens on their side. What's likely to be the driving motivation is my own preservation of my life. And that's a worse way to view ours. That's a worse way to operate when you're in the field, when other people's lives depend on you as well. But this leads me to the second issue about when we're talking about like PTSD, for example. Because they said that it's okay because they can process it afterwards and it makes it easier for them because they don't have to be unstable in the field and make worse decisions then. But let's really look at what this does, right? You're shelving emotions, you're literally putting them away in their mental locker, and they're gonna have to process all of this at once with the memory of what they did. And they weren't able to process this while it was happening or throughout that entire process. This is how emotions work, this is how humans work. We can't simply compartmentalize in this way, and to do so to soldiers is absolutely torturing them. We think that's even more inhumane. In fact, what helps us deal with PTSD is that brotherhood, is feeling that we had camaraderie with people, that I care about that translator I left in Syria, that I care about the civilians that I saved. Those are the kinds of things that redeem you at the end of the day and make it worthwhile to keep fighting for the things that matter. Thanks.
Three things to look at to assess this debate. Firstly, operationalization of the model. Secondly, in terms of where we get a better principled war/military. And third, where do we get a more efficient or better military. Firstly, let's deal with their model. And this is what I want to hammer on their weak point of their model, where they had a weak stance or weak provision where they said that when you deposit emotions, they could be returned later on. First of all, they didn't prove what is the value in returning these emotions. At best, actually concede that emotions are necessary for an individual to function. But secondly, we say that there's an urgency disproven already by the DLO. And we said that PTSD treatments have already been getting better and better. In fact, we already identify whether or not a person, an individual, needs therapy. But the concession here is that you actually make your end goal of solving PTSD worse on the government side. It's because of both LO and DLO statements where they said that you compound emotions and you make them process these experiences afterwards. So if DPM's premise is that we have to evaluate whether a person has PTSD at the very onset, we say it's harder to test these kinds of things because you actually compound these emotions later on. But moreover, we say that invalidates the extension from DPM where you have better testimonies, therefore it leads to more accountability. Because these testimonies are content or dependent on these emotions existing in the very first place. But it doesn't make sense as to why you deposit these emotions to begin with. The conclusion of this is, they did not prove their end goal as to how they reduce, number one, the mental stability or the mental health of these soldiers. But number two, we prove to you why you actually create a more better mental health environment, or there's already existing mechanisms on that. Number two, let's talk about the principle war or principle military. Let's look at the language government side used. The military apparently was there to kill. The military is apparently there to serve an inhumane job. That's precisely this form of language we want to remove from the military or the perceptions of the military. People kill to protect their own state. It's inhumane only if you commit war crimes, ladies and gentlemen, commit ethics. And this is the other contention. If DPM conceded that morals have already been established by emotions before, number one, this already debunks, or this actually drops PM's characterization that ethics and emotions don't collide. But secondly, we say, it's not about if they have been established, Mr. Speaker, but where will you better maintain? We posit to you, and I wanted to raise POI to go with, but he didn't take any POIs, where he said, if generals are driven to a more efficient mission, we argued, coming from our side, that these war crimes are a more efficient means to achieving that end goal and achieving that success. What exactly is an example that I talked about earlier? If, for example, you recognize that ISIS is located in an area near a children's hospital, or proximity of a children's hospital, we will still count ISIS as a general without emotion, because the more rational decision is to do away with any existing war crime that is presupposed at ending. But more importantly, if their rationale is success of the mission, they get that success. But at what cost, Mr. Speaker? At the cost of saying that the military is only there to kill people, or the military is only there to do an inhumane job. And we say, Mr. Speaker, we don't want to go under that line of attack. It's only through emotions that people recognize and consolidate that war crimes are never justifiable. On their side, sure, in some cases they won't commit war crimes, but there's still a danger in for them to allow war crimes to exist, especially when they don't maintain any pre-existing war crime. The last is a better military. Does the process or presence or lack of emotions lead to better training / better decisions? The problem with this is that they never nebulize it into assuming that people will better fire guns, or people will make better, for example, training measures, or people will be more physical. The only thing they had was this idea of fear of death. This is where we have to compare, Mr. Speaker. Which is more effective? This idea of fear of death, or this idea they just disjunct as like camaraderie between soldiers? It's not just about romance, for example. It's also about establishing relations and ensuring a human connectivity at the day that was not responded to. But even then, we already told you that these individuals who go through military training, they are not robbed of emotions, but they're actually strengthened of emotions. So they have to prove why in some cases there is a fear of death, but in our side we still mitigate it. But even if we're willing to trade that off at the expense that we create a more cohesive unit within the military. And that's why they don't get the better military, they don't have principled ones. So we're very proud of those. Thank you.
Thank you. I like government reply to conclude this debate. Okay.
The reason we treat soldiers, especially those who have served in war, with medals of honor and applaud them for their bravery is because they were willing to face death and stare into the face and still fight for the nation. The fact that people accept death upon entering the military is already given. But sometimes this bravery fails, and sometimes it fires back, especially to innocent civilians. When you are afraid that, for example, ISIS militants may be running after you, but upon closer inspection, it's a teenager who was a child soldier who was recruited unfairly, we think that fear will force you to think that as an assailant, and you will kill him, and you will not follow protocol. We think that we reach out to help, and we become a better humanity when we have less emotion, especially with something as disciplined as the military. I'll judge this debate using 3 criteria. 1, how do we better treat our own soldiers? 2, how do we handle accountability in terms of state level? And lastly, where do we fight efficient wars? Firstly, on soldiers, because this entire op case, right? They say camaraderie is important because we need camaraderie in order to push for that drive. And second, we think that them being not able to see themselves at faces of death is unfair for a soldier. First, we think that soldiers enter the military on the premise that they may or may not die, that they have to give their lives to the state, especially when they're on the front lines. We think they agreed to this when they signed that contract to begin with. But second, we think that they say they will lose all drive and no longer be part of the military if they don't have emotions. We think that your logical ability to sign this contract at first while you're still fully informed with your emotions is the one that you would want to pursue at the end of the day. But second, we think that they also kind of had really bad analysis in terms of dealing with all of their emotions afterwards. If you notice, it was a one-liner from LO, a one-liner from DLO, and they tried to argue that reply with substantiation by saying, oh, it's so heavy to bear because it's all compounded. I already preemptively responded to this in my deputy speech. I said that these individuals will be less ridden by guilt because majority of PTSD is derived from guilt and resentment towards the self. We think that these are better handled in our paradigm as well, even assuming that their lacking argument is true. But second, we think that in order to have an actionable morality, this is something we didn't discuss, because we told you that morality was already agreed on by man, that your head of state will more often than not try to follow protocol now, and we think that these are what guides your moral calculus. Let's have a thought experiment. Yeah, cool. The whole orphanage thing, they use orphanage to make you guys more sympathetic to it. They're trying to use emotions to make you make the wrong decision in this debate. But rather, what happens is that When you have individuals without emotion and you know it from the higher ups that your head of state instructed this action to begin with, that is accountability. They didn't deal with this. They only responded by saying, oh, the UN has no teeth. I already responded to this in my argument. This is already the second issue, by the way, how we handle accountability through the state. Think of it, right, as if that the state is more clean when people make less emotional mistakes, which is easier to find true accountability. What does it mean? It means that head of states will be responsible for their actions about mankind. And they responded by saying the UN has no teeth. But I argued, and I said, it's not just the UN's teeth that prevents the US from doing this. It's fear that their allies will think that they're principally inconsistent. You cannot, for example, engage in war in Iraq and put your boots on the ground because they are violating human rights when you yourself violates human rights. Regardless of the UN, your allies won't trust you. You're gonna lose wars. You're gonna have less legitimacy in the future. That's the flashpoints of action myself, Saranya argued, and Sae reinforced in his quick speech. But you think the state has more accountability? They had a shoddy response to it. Lastly, where do we fight more efficient wars? And this is where we say that yes, maybe that stronghold might be bomb, but at least it was efficient because that was the instruction of individuals who see from the macro perspective. Your heads of states, your presidents, Mr. Chair, the person the people elect to do just more on behalf of your country, on behalf of the lives of these individuals who risk and face death every single day for every single taxpayer of the country. What did we prove to you in this debate? We proved to you how we humanize war by second, practically it works efficiently, and third, using a global framework on how international relations run today, we're gonna have more faith in our allies and not just be afraid of the UN's seats. We didn't just argue camaraderie and the human appeal to pain. We think these things are transferable. I'd rather have brothers that I know who would die for me instead of brothers who I can grow fists with. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for the lovely debate. Go and shake hands.